Sarah approached library organization like reading a three-dimensional map with her fingertips, using texture, spacing, and positioning to maintain perfect order among thousands of books. When someone asked about her remarkable efficiency, her explanation revealed that losing her sight had led her to develop organizational skills that were more precise than any visual system. The library assistant who arranged books by touch, full script, 15 minutes. Sarah approached library organization like reading a three-dimensional map with her fingertips, using texture, spacing, and positioning to maintain perfect order among thousands of books. When someone asked about her remarkable efficiency, her explanation revealed that losing her sight had led her to develop organizational skills that were more precise than any visual system. Welcome to Silent Heroes. Before we begin this inspiring story about adaptation, professional excellence, and the power of alternative skills, tell me in the comments where you're watching from today. And if you believe stories about overcoming challenges through innovation deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button. These stories redefine what's possible. The Roosevelt Public Library on Elm Street served a community of 45,000 residents with a collection that included over 200,000 books, periodicals, and digital resources. The three-story building housed everything from children's picture books to academic research materials, and maintaining organization across such a vast collection required exceptional attention to detail and systematic approach. Sarah Martinez had been working as a library assistant for 6 years, and during that time, she had developed a reputation among staff and patrons for her extraordinary ability to locate any item in the collection. While other employees relied on the computerized catalog system and visual scanning to find materials, Sarah seemed to navigate the stacks with an almost supernatural sense of where everything belonged. Patrons would approach Sarah with incomplete information, a half-remembered author's name, a vague description of a book's cover, or just a general topic, and she would guide them directly to the relevant section, often locating the exact item they were seeking within minutes. Her colleagues marveled at her efficiency and assumed she had simply memorized the entire library organization system. What made Sarah's abilities even more remarkable was her approach to shelving and organizing returned materials. While other staff members would cart books, she would run her fingers along book spines, feeling the texture of different bindings and the spacing between volumes. She seemed to read the collection through touch, identifying gaps where books belonged and detecting items that had been placed incorrectly by others. Other library employees had noticed Sarah's unusual methods, but attributed them to personal preference or exceptional attention to detail. Some assumed she was just very thorough in her work. Others thought she might have developed photographic memory for the collection's organization. What none of them realized was that Sarah was legally blind and had been navigating the library entirely through tactile and auditory cues since losing most of her vision 5 years earlier due to diabetic retinopathy. Sarah's vision loss had been gradual, occurring over several months as her diabetes affected the blood vessels in her retinas. At first, she had tried to continue her library work using her remaining peripheral vision and by positioning herself closer to materials. But as her sight deteriorated further, Sarah realized she needed to develop entirely new methods for performing her job duties. Rather than requesting a transfer to a position that required less visual acuity, Sarah began experimenting with tactile navigation techniques. She started by learning braille, not just for reading, but for creating her own organizational labels and reference systems. She developed a mental mapping system for the library's layout that relied on counting steps, identifying tactile landmarks, and using audio cues from heating systems, foot traffic, and ambient sounds. Most importantly, Sarah learned to read books and library materials through touch, with a sensitivity that most sighted people never develop. She could identify different binding materials, distinguish between hardcover and paperback editions, and even recognize specific publishers by the texture and weight of their products. Sarah created her own supplementary organization system using small braille labels that she placed discreetly on shelves to mark sections and subsections. These labels were but Sarah kept her visual impairment completely private. She had learned the library's layout so thoroughly that her movement appeared confident and natural. She timed her most challenging tasks for quieter periods when she could work without the pressure of patron requests, and she developed explanations for her working methods that didn't reveal her visual limitations. The discovery came through Marcus Thompson, a graduate student in library science who had been volunteering at Roosevelt Public Library for his practicum requirements. Marcus was particularly interested in information organization systems and had been observing different staff members' approaches to collection management. Marcus noticed that Sarah's shelving and retrieval methods were unlike anything he had studied in his coursework. She appeared to work without consulting the computer catalog, never seemed to check call numbers against visual labels, and moved through the stacks with a confidence that suggested she was using some kind of advanced organizational system. During a busy Tuesday afternoon, Marcus watched Sarah help a patron locate a specific book on local history. Instead of searching the computer database or checking section signs, Sarah walked directly to the appropriate shelf and located the book using what appeared to be tactile identification of the surrounding volumes. When the patron left, Marcus approached Sarah to ask about her navigation method. "Sarah, I've been watching your approach to collection organization, and I'm really impressed by your efficiency. Are you using some kind of advanced cataloging system that we haven't covered in library school?" Sarah was cautious in her response, unsure how much to reveal about her methods. "I've developed some techniques that work well for me. Every library collection has its own patterns and characteristics. I've noticed that you don't seem to use the computer catalog very much, and you navigate the stacks differently than other staff members. Are you using memory techniques or some kind of alternative organization system?" Marcus's questions suggested genuine professional curiosity rather than suspicion, and Sarah realized this might be an opportunity to explain her approach to someone who could understand it from an academic perspective. "Marcus, can I ask you something? In your library science program, have you studied accessibility and alternative navigation methods for people with visual impairments? We've covered some basic accessibility requirements, but not in great detail. Why do you ask?" Sarah took a breath and made a decision that would change how she approached her work. "Because that's what you've been observing. I'm legally blind, and everything I do here is adapted for working without functional vision. My efficiency comes from developing organizational systems that work with touch, hearing, and spatial memory instead of sight." Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing this information and realizing that what he had assumed was advanced cataloging technique was actually sophisticated disability adaptation. "Sarah, what you've developed is incredible. You're essentially using the library collection as a three-dimensional information system that you navigate through tactile and spatial cues. This goes way beyond anything we've studied in terms of alternative organization methods." That conversation marked the beginning of a transformation in how Sarah approached her visual impairment and her professional capabilities. For the first time, she began to see her adaptations not as compensations for a disability, but as innovative techniques that could have value beyond her personal accommodation needs. Marcus encouraged Sarah to document her methods and consider sharing them with the broader library science community. He helped her realize that her tactile navigation system and alternative organization techniques represented a form of professional expertise that could benefit other libraries and librarians. Sarah began working with Marcus to create a formal description of her tactile library navigation methods. They documented her techniques for identifying books through touch, her spatial mapping system for navigating large collections, and her approach to creating accessible organization tools. Word of Sarah's story and methods began to spread through the library science community. Other librarians who worked with visually impaired patrons asked to learn her techniques for making collections more accessible. Library schools began incorporating information about tactile navigation methods into their accessibility curricula. Sarah was invited to speak at library conferences about alternative organization systems and accessibility innovations. Her presentations always emphasized that her methods weren't just accommodation strategies. They were often more precise and efficient than conventional visual approaches. But perhaps most importantly, Sarah became an advocate for recognizing that visual impairment in library professionals could be an asset rather than a limitation. Her experience demonstrated that alternative navigation methods could enhance library services and make collections more accessible. Sarah has also expanded her work to include consulting with other libraries on accessibility improvements, developing training programs for library staff working with visually impaired colleagues, and advocating for inclusive design in library systems. Her message is always practical and encouraging. Visual impairment doesn't limit your ability to understand information organization or help people access resources. It just means you develop different ways of navigating and organizing. Sometimes those different ways are actually more thorough and reliable than the conventional approaches. When people ask Sarah about her advice for other visually impaired individuals considering careers in library science, her response reflects the confidence she has gained through years of professional success. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't work with books and information because you can't see them. Some of the most important aspects of library work, understanding organization systems, helping people find what they need, and maintaining collection integrity, have nothing to do with vision. Focus on developing strong tactile and spatial skills, and you'll often find that your alternative methods make you better at the job, not just able to do the job. Now, I ask you, have you encountered someone whose alternative approaches to common tasks turned out to be more effective than conventional methods? Someone whose adaptations became innovations that others wanted to learn? Share their story in the comments below, because here at Silent Heroes, we believe that the most valuable professional techniques often come from people who can't rely on standard approaches. Thank you for watching. If this story changed how you think about visual impairment, professional adaptation, and alternative organizational methods, subscribe to help us share more stories about turning challenges into expertise. Hit that notification bell. Share this with someone who works in libraries or education. Until next time, remember that the most innovative professional techniques often develop from necessity, and that limitations in one area frequently lead to exceptional capabilities in others.